So I am Grace Acosta. My legal name is Sylvia Graciela Acosta, but everyone calls me Grace because I was raised in the rural South and no one could say Graciela. And so everyone just called me Grace, and that stuck. It's my nickname. So if you ask anyone who I am Grace Acosta, although that is not my legal name, just so you know. And it has been confusing for all my bar licenses and things of that nature, but so don't ever call your kids different names, but it's been my life, apparently. So I am from rural Alabama, born to Uruguayan parents. My parents came over with a Peace Corps program under the Kennedy administration to teach Spanish as a second language in pre-integration Alabama schools. Yeah, and so I grew up with George Wallace as my next door neighbor. That is a true story. I know, isn't that weird? In this really small town in the middle of nowhere. And then my parents were lawyers in South America. But then they came over and they became educators. And so they taught law school, they taught college. And my dad ended up being an elementary school principal. My mother was a Title I coordinator in the state of Alabama, accrediting schools. So I knew from the age of 7 that I wanted to be a lawyer. Okay, so and literally it's all I've ever wanted to do. For a while there, I thought I wanted to be a poet. So I was an English major, so I took lots of English classes, but I've always known I wanted to be a lawyer because I'm really good at language. I've always been kind of a wordsmith and able to articulate my feelings clearly. And even as a young child, I knew that was my strength. So I always had a plan of how I was going to go to law school. And because my parents have been lawyers, I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer too. Now, they weren't lawyers in America, so they didn't pass the bars here, but they were lawyers in their home countries where school is free. And higher education is free in Uruguay, and so they both got their law degrees without any student debt. I wasn't quite so lucky, I had to pay for it myself. So I wanted you to know that I always say law school is a good idea because it is one of the most flexible careers you can ever have. Lots of presidents of the United States were lawyers, lots of senators, a lot of politicians are lawyers, lots of people on Wall Street are lawyers. Law degrees really create a foundation for a lot of different careers and lots of different arenas. So whether you want to do private sector or be a public servant or maybe work in public administration and do charity work, law degrees are very, very helpful. So I didn't know how much you guys knew about law. And so I really started from the very beginning, and I'll throw in some stories along the way, hopefully to make it more interesting for you guys. But what I want you to recognize is that owning your own business is the true key to success. I always say salaries are for suckers. Okay, because if someone offers you a salary, you have to realize they're making money off of you. Okay, they're providing you with an income because you're a profit source for them. So if you can be your own profit source, then you're going to make more money in the end. Okay, so just think about that. All right. Now, and I'm not saying that you can start right off, open up your own shingle, or we always call it hanging out your own shingle as a lawyer, because maybe you don't know enough. And so it's valuable to get trained by someone. So maybe you go and work for someone else and you get your salary for 5 years. But after a certain point in time, there's something to be said for starting your own business. Okay, so I am a strong believer in the entrepreneurial spirit. And I will tell you, every person that I know of that has tried their own business and had a good model and a good foundation for it and was able to be successful never regrets it, because you do make more money and have more free time. But nothing in the world is free. Okay, guys, you have to work really hard. And people think about lawyers making lots of money, being all fat cats. We work really, really hard. We are like doctors in the sense that everyone that I deal with is in crisis. And they need me to help them through that crisis. And so there's a lot of stress associated with this. And so secondary trauma is a real thing for lawyers. So I'm just warning you that if you're a highly emotional person, like you take things in from your environment, being a lawyer is difficult for you because you live the stress of your clients. So it takes the right personality to be able to separate yourself away from your client's stress, to maintain your objectivity, to be a good counselor, to help people through problems, okay? So let's just talk about some of the basic stuff to get there. Hold on, let's see. Maybe you have to change.
I see.
There we go. Okay. did I skip some? I did. Okay, so one of the most important things is you have to go to college to be a lawyer. That sounds basic, but sometimes you don't, you don't have to go to college, sometimes to open up a Taco Bell, right? Although I wouldn't necessarily do that without an MBA either, because there's a lot of money involved in Taco Bells, believe it or not. Running a fast food restaurant is it takes a lot of know-it-all. I've done a lot of franchising, that's how come I even know that. All right, so, you must go to college. It works for most majors. So those people who are meandering through life and haven't figured out they wanted to be an English major like me, early on, you can still go to law school with all kinds of degrees. That's the nice thing about law school. It's only a 3-year program. And that seems like a lot at your age, but it's really, in the whole grand scheme of things, 3 years to be able to have the earning potential that I have is nothing. Okay, doctors need 7 years, and then they have to do their residency. So all in, a medical student has to do 10 years. With 3 years degrees, you can, 3 years of law school after you get through your undergrads, you can have the earning potential of a doctor. Okay, so basically, a lot less time, a lot more earning potential. So it's a very good degree in that respect. So it works with all majors. Science-based are required if you want to go to patent law. So patents, do you know what a patent is? A patent is like, so if I wanted, like whoever created this Elmo submitted a patent to the patent office in Washington DC and said, I'm gonna create a patent, which is basically a schematic for how to create this object. And then I'm gonna buy the rights to that object and no one else can make it other than me. In order to be a patent lawyer, which means you have to present your patent to the patent office and defend why that object is unique enough to be patented, you have to have a science base because it's so much engineering and math. Okay, so as an English major, I couldn't go and become a patent lawyer. I could, but it'd be really hard. Most of the time, people who want to be patent lawyers do engineering, are mathematicians, and then they go to law school and become a patent attorney. Okay, so depending on, people are always high about, oh, I want to go to Harvard Law, I want to go to Yale, or there are thousands and thousands of law schools, guys. Okay, and you know what you call someone that graduates from like a 3rd-tier small school in Iowa? You call them a lawyer. So it doesn't matter, okay? Seriously, so if you're brilliant and you want to go to Harvard and you have a fantastic LSAT score and you're a brilliant person, hallelujah, go do it. But for the rest of us who are normal people, you can go to law school in Provo, you can go to law school at BYU or the University of Utah, although Utah happens to have 2 of the top 50 ranked law schools in the nation. So we have 2 very good law schools in this state. So, but you can go to other law schools all over the country and still have a very lucrative career. Don't let someone else's expectations about what success looks like control you. Okay, if you want to be a lawyer, don't give up on the dream, take the LSAT and go to any law school that'll take you. Okay, I mean, seriously, because at the end of the day, when I meet a client, they don't say, oh, Grace, where did you go to law school? They ask me, what's my rates? What's my win records? They feel comfortable in my presence? Do they feel like I can represent them adequately? Your class rankings and your law school rankings, it matters for that first job. But after that, and I've been out for 30 years, no one can care less what I made on the LSAT. Okay, so now, so there are certain schools, and there's a ranking, the US News Reports has a ranking every year, and you can buy books and it tells you you have to have this much of a GPA, this much of an LSAT score, and then in order to get admitted. And those are pretty good. I mean, and so you live your dream how you live it. Okay, guys, but I'm telling you, if you think you want to be a lawyer and have the serious earning potential of a lawyer, which is legit, guys, then don't stop it. Okay, so the LSAT is a test you have to take, like the MCATs are at the end of med school. The LSAT is a logic-based testing that basically doesn't test your knowledge of anything other than your ability to problem solve. Okay, because lawyers, we're really problem solvers. People come in and say, hey, my neighbor and I are having a fight about my boundary. The tree is leaning over my house. What can I do? And I have to take that set of facts, apply it to the law, and come up with a solution. But most of what I do is just come up with a compromise, and it's all about logic. Okay, and all legal writing, which we have courses on in law school, is literally all about logic. Do you guys? I took philosophy instead of my math major because I was English, so I could take philosophy and logic instead of taking a math course in college. And I remember thinking, this is really hard. But it helps me so much with the LSAT. So if you want to go to law school, I would suggest taking a logic course in college, because it will prepare you very much for the LSAT. Because the LSAT is all about logic games, and people are in the test going, what does this have to do with law school? It'll be things like, so-and-so's having a wedding and she bought 5 dozen roses, 6 dozen carnations, 7 dozen, whatever, tulips. And she needs to make an arrangement that has at least 2 roses and 1 tulip. And then you have to figure out how many bouquets can she make. That's really what the test is about. And so it drives people crazy because it has nothing to do with being a lawyer, except it has everything to do with being a lawyer, just so you know. So you have to take the LSAT, your GPA, and then they care about your community service, right? Because in order to, I always say that I am the powerful, because I have the power given me by the courts to subpoena. I can subpoena you to come and sit here and answer questions for me, because I'm an officer of the court. Now, I'm one of the branches of government. People don't think about that at all, but lawyers, we fall under the judiciary branch. And so the judiciary branch gives us our power, but I have a lot of power over other people. So you want people that have that power to have a good moral compass. Okay, because you can see, this is where all the nasty lawyer jokes come from, is because there are lawyers that have less scruples than they should, and they take advantage of their position. Okay, so community activities does matter for college admissions, but what they're trying to gauge is how good of a person are you, because we're about to give you a lot of power. And before we give it to you, we want to make sure that you know how to handle it. And so that's where those things come in. Has anybody thought about going to law school ever? Is that something? Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So these things do really matter. Okay, so law school is 3 years. You can also get an MBA and other kinds of degrees along with your law degree too. They have some schools have joint programs in psychology and law. You can get it. We have masters in law degree. They're called LLMs. I don't know what it stands for actually. Something legal master, but something LLM, I don't know. But they're usually almost always in taxation though. So people who want to become specialized in taxation, they'll get an LLM. Okay, any questions about this? All right, Bill, you might want to be a lawyer now. You're like, oh, she's so awesome. I want to be a lawyer. I'll hang out and work with her every day. Okay, so the power of a law degree is super powerful. It is the foundation for a lot of things. Okay, it can be lots of business people, lots of banking people, commerce people, people who do mergers and acquisitions and securities, politicians. A lot of those people are lawyers. And it's because it's a good general studies that helps prepare you generally for seeing the world. Does that make sense? So how many of you guys know a lawyer? Anybody know any lawyers? Do you know lawyers? Yeah. Has anybody ever shadowed? Who's ever been in a court proceeding? You don't have to. Yeah, court proceeding. It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Just jury duty.
Just jury duty. That's pretty cool, right?
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Do we ever jury duty? We wish that we can get jury duty, but they always strike lawyers off of the jury. Do you know why they would strike lawyers off of the jury? Because people would listen to us too much. So you have to realize that when you want to be on the jury that we want as a lawyer is a jury that only listens to me. Right? I want a bunch of followers. So we strike leaders off the juries, just so you know. So if you get out of it, you get out of it, be really opinionated. Okay, so be really opinionated and really strong-willed, we get rid of you because I don't know what you're going to do behind closed doors. So I don't like you. You're a risk to me. But if I know you, if I know that you're all kind of followers, then I believe that I can control you. Yeah.
If you knew someone else starting a business, would you recommend them to go to law school first?
Depends on the business. What kind of business is it?
Okay, let's say a barbershop.
Maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe not, because you can hire a lawyer. Because I always say you have to be able to delegate your tasks, right? So, I mean, it would be nice if you had a lawyer to read your leases or someone to look at your supply purchase contracts, things like that. Maybe your employment contracts, deal with your garnishments. These are all things that small businesses deal with. But if you can delegate that task, then I would delegate it to a lawyer, right? Because then you can focus on being the barbershop owner, which is what you're good at, which is customer service and making it look a certain way and dealing with the types of services that you want to. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes, it does.
because you can't do everything.
True.
And so, and you should always know, and everything that you always tell people, you should at least spend 5 to 6% of your budget on a lawyer. Just like you're going to spend 5 to 6% on buying a house to a real estate agent, lawyers are the same way. So if you're gonna do a transaction, you should build into your cost sheet legal fees. Okay, so if they ever make you do a business plan where you're applying for a loan for a business, please don't skip that part. Put in there your legal services, 5 to 6%. It's very necessary, and having that 5 or 6% in your budget will make your life so much easier because you can delegate some of those tasks. I read leases for all my neighbors and friends all the time because that's what you do when you're a lawyer, right? And they can't always afford me, but you'll see. Does that make sense? Okay, all right, perfect. So, so a lot of things people don't realize that law school is not enough. And that kind of, so law school is 3 years. I'll just give you a brief overview of it though. First year is your basic classes, and it's literally like the building blocks. They have a whole class on contracts, a whole class on torts. And torts is like slip and falls, car accidents is the word we use in the law for personal injury, okay? So there's a whole class. And there's a whole class on like the Constitution, and there's a whole class on criminal law. And basically, you get all the basics your first year, and then you start specializing, okay? As second and third year. And we always joke that first year they work you to death, second year they bore you to death. Because then you start like having to read about areas that you like a lot, okay? When you graduate from law school, it's not over though, you have to pass the bar. So the bar is a competency exam to make sure that you meet the minimum requirements for a state to allow someone to practice. So doctors do this too, right? So you probably, if you've ever been to someone, you should get someone from DOPL. This will be an interesting conversation for your class. DOPL is the state licensing board that licenses nurses and doctors and physical therapists and contractors and everyone else in the world except for lawyers. Lawyers, we're only controlled directly from the Supreme Court. Okay, so because our power comes directly from the judiciary, we fall outside of this regulatory rules and schemes. So our lawyers are really unique in the world, but every other professional is regulated by the state. The only thing the state can do is require us to take the bar. Okay, and that makes sure that every lawyer that's practicing in your state has a minimum understanding of the law so that they don't lead people astray. Do I think it works? It's a floor, guys. It's not a ceiling. Does that make any sense? So it's like the bare minimum that you should know before you practice law. You can still make lots of mistakes. Why we joke. That's why we call it practicing law, because there's no practicing medicine, practicing law. We're still trying to do the best we can. Okay. So the pass rates for every state is different. But I've taken the bar exam in 5 states. Okay, so I'm licensed in California, Nebraska, Utah, and Idaho. That's 4 states. I sat for the bar in California, which everyone was failing around me. So I took it in February, which is the off time to take the bar. Normal bar times are in June or July. And so when I was there with all the people that had failed before, and they were freaking me out. I was like, okay, I'm not listening to you guys anymore. I can't talk. You guys are like, this is my 3rd time taking it. This is my 4th time taking it. It's not that the bar exam in California is any harder than any of the other tests, having taken them in other states. It's just that the quality of the law schools in California are not as good. Does that make sense? So the applicants are the difference, not the exam. Because in California, you don't have to go to law school to be a lawyer.
Wait, what?
Yep, California allows you to apprentice.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you can apprentice 3 years as a lawyer, and then you can then sit for the bar, and as long as you pass the floor, they'll allow you to practice, but only in the state of California. Okay, so yeah.
So the exam is like the same across the nation?
So there is a standardized portion of the exam, okay? So that's called the MBE, the multi-state bar exam, and that's multiple choice questions. But then there's an essay portion, and that varies from state to state. Like Utah does straight up essays, like they give you a fact pattern and you have to write an essay on it. California does like practicums, which means they'll give you like a case file from like a superior in a law firm and be like, hey, I need you to write a memo on this topic, and here's 3 cases, and argue whether or not our client can win this or not. And they make you do like a practicum thing. So it depends. So I would say 50% of it is standardized, and the other 50% is going to vary by by the state taking it. When I took the exam in California, they did it at the state fairgrounds, so I was sitting on a lawn chair in a barn, this is, for real. And I was like, this is crazy, and it's very intense, and there's a monitor, almost a 1-to-2 ratio. So if I went to the restroom, there's somebody like walking behind me, like 3 paces, like when I go to the bathroom, they won't let you can't talk to anybody. Some person had a panic attack in the middle of the exam, and a hospital gurney came in and took him out, and they didn't stop the exam. It was crazy. It was crazy. I was like, wow, these people are like really intense. I passed the first time, just so you know, because I've been practicing for 5 years by the time I've taken it. And I was thinking, if I can't pass the bar, I'm embarrassed, right? But you do have to, so you have to take the bar at every state. And a lot of that is to like, think about which states would have the hardest bar exams or the lowest pass rates. Sometimes they do that like Hawaii. Because otherwise, I'm just gonna go live in Hawaii, because Hawaii's beautiful. No, Hawaii is a hard bar to pass because they make the scores be higher because they want to discourage people from coming there. Nevada has a high bar too, just so you know. So yeah,
What about New York?
New York's actually one of the ones you can wade into.
Really?
Yeah, so the MBE can, once you make a certain high enough score on your MBE, you can waive into certain states, and New York is one of them, you can waive into. Yeah. So Utah has a waiver as well. We can waive it into Utah as well if you want to. You don't have to sit for the bar itself. So there's a book you can buy that talks to you. It's called by a company called Barbary, and they just teach. They teach about law stuff, and they have a rankings of all the bar exams and like how hard it is, what you should study, what you shouldn't study. What I say is, if you just pay attention and do a good job and you're smart, you can do this. Okay, I have met some of the dumbest people as lawyers you can possibly imagine, and I am sure that if those people can make it, you guys can make it. Okay, so that's what I always say to myself. I'm like, you may have a bad day, you don't pass the first time, but you can pass the second time. All right.
Are you able to waive into the state bar or just the law degree?
No, the state bar. You can never waive into the law degree. You must attend the law school classes for an ABA accredited school for most bars, except for California is the one exception. They allow for apprenticeships. Okay? There's the rules. Have fun, huh? So do you guys want to know, like I said, all the information's out there. You Googled Barbary, it's spelled BARBRI. They have a national database that tells you about every state and what's required to pass the bar in that state and what you have to do. We also have to take an ethics course. It's called the MPRE. What's it stand for? Multi-state professional responsibility exam, I think is what it stands for. And that's required for sitting for every bar as well. And it goes through ethics questions. So you take an entire course for a whole year in law school on ethics to teach you how to not take advantage of your clients. Because as you can well imagine, I am privy to lots of confidential and private information on a daily basis. And if I was an unscrupulous person, I could take advantage of my clients, right? And so that's a big ethics is a big component of being a lawyer. Even though that's where all the jokes come from, it's not true. We are very bound by our ethics. It's a controlling factor in almost all of my decision making, just so you know, guys. Like I constantly am confronted with what can I do with this information, what I can't do with this information, what should I do with this? Should I represent this person? Can I represent your neighbor against you now that I've known you? When it causes a problem, I constantly have to think through these things. And you can imagine small town lawyers have to have a real big heartburn on this because they know everybody. Right, and they probably know every secret of every person in that little town. So anyway, so you have to be a trustworthy human being. Okay. Also, once you get a law degree, it doesn't end. We have to continue to go to school too. I have to get 12 hours of continuing legal education every year. Okay, which means I have to go to a couple of days of seminars every year to make sure that I'm current on the law, because the law is constantly changing, right? And there's new laws that are passed, there's new cases that come out. Just generally speaking, I'll tell you how the law is broken down. On one category is like the statutes and the written laws, like, like you shall park 12 inches away from the curb. That's an ordinance in your city, whether you know it or not. That's statutory law. Then we have something we call common law, which means what does it mean to park 12 inches away from the curb? Well, there's case law, that people, examples of cases that have come up where people fight and say, well, I was parked 12 inches from the curb. Was that measured from my bumper or is it measured from my tire? Okay, and then what if the curb has a little indentation? Do I do it from the deepest part of the curb or the farthest part out? Okay, what if my car has fenders on them that stick out? Do the fenders count or is it from the rubber? You're thinking nothing crazy. That's what lawyers do. That's what we talk about all the time. Like, what does this very simple rule, you must park 12 inches from the curb, mean? How does it apply in your life? Right? That's what we do every day. And I answer all those kinds of questions. Well, that's called the common law. And so the Supreme Court will issue rulings in cases every week. And they'll say, oh, well, we believe it has to be measured from the deepest part of the curve or the shallowest part of the curve. And then they make a ruling, and that's called the common law. And so now, when the police officer pulls you over and says, hey, you weren't parked 12 inches away from the curb, or you're less than 12 or more than 12 inches away from the curb, that officer has to know the recent case law. Does that make sense? So lawyers have to know it too. Okay, so I think understand my job. I think that's super fun and kind of entertaining, but some people be like, that sounds really dull and lame. But I think it's fascinating and fun because I've always liked language and like having to argue things, okay? All right, so now you graduated from law school, what do you want to do? There's lots of options. You don't have to go straight out and to get a job, guys. There's lots of things because the law is so varied, we're teaching you how to think more than how to do something necessarily. So we're teaching you how to see the same objects on all different sides. Like, I'm sure you've heard the parable of the 5 blind men that like come across an animal and they all touch a different part of it. And the one guy goes, oh, it's long and slender like a snake. And the other goes, no, it's not. It's thick and big like a trunk. And the other one says, no, it's big and flat like a wall. What they're doing is they're all blind men touching different parts of an elephant, right? And they're all feeling the same item, but they're feeling different aspects of it, okay? So if you're learning how to think like that, like you're learning how to say, oh, an elephant can be both a trunk in its trees, it can be snake-like, it can be wall-like, depending on the circumstances that you want to talk to about, okay? So a lot of things we want to do is to continue to train our brains to be more thoughtful like this. And one of the key ways to do is to get a clerkship. Okay, so I clerked for the Supreme Court of Nebraska for 2 years, and then I clerked for the Utah Court of Appeals. So after I did my 4 years of undergrad at Auburn University, by the way, War Eagle, 3 years in Nebraska, go Huskers. I did 2 years in the Supreme Court of Nebraska, and then 2 years in the Court of Appeals of Utah. Okay, so even though I told you it was only a 3-year program, I really added on 4 more years of school. Voluntarily. Now they paid me to do it, okay? So I'm working under a judge, and the judge pays me to help guide that judge through their decision-making processes. Okay, and so, but it's basically more school. All right, so it's another way to hone your skills. I'm trying to make myself the best lawyer I can be. And how do you do that? Is you hang out with really smart lawyers. And you talk to other lawyers. So those judges, obviously, at the pinnacles of their careers, they've all been selected for a reason because they are very smart. And so I work for them and I learn to be smart too. I learned to think like they think and reason like they think. And so that's what I did clerkships for. Okay, so that's clerkships, and there's tons of them. I happen to clerk for state courts. So I did a state Supreme Court, but you could do federal courts too. And there's people don't even realize how varied the federal system is. Like Supreme Court clerkships, wow, I mean, those are the people that become Supreme Court justices, okay? They clerk for judges and they get to know them and they become Supreme Court justices. Every person that's on the court today clerked for a federal judge, just so you know. Or you can go to federal courts at circuit level, or you can do the federal magistrate judges, which is the next level down. Our district court judges and then magistrates, or you can do state courts. Tons. These are very competitive, but I would recommend a clerkship to anyone who thinks they want to be a litigator or be a lawyer long term. It's amazing. It was so fun. I learned the coolest things. I mean, lots of sleepless nights wrangling with cases, because they deal I mean, and there's still cases that I remember to this day that I worked on, and I've been practicing since '97, yeah,
Can you share some of them?
absolutely,
Sweet.
so like the one that I remember the most, her name was Kenyatta Bush. She was an African-American cheerleader who decided in 10th grade to go out to her car to pick up a textbook that she had left in her car. And when she went out to the parking lot, two guys, they were both white, had dropped 8 balls, which is like cocaine,
Yep.
saw her and they decided they were gonna kill her.
Mhm.
And so they just, she's literally in the parking lot, just completely, the randomness of this would really like, this really impacted me. And they picked her up and they raped her and then they murdered her and they almost decapitated her and left her in the woods. And they got away with it for a year until the anniversary of her death. They ran a ritual. This is why they do this, by the way. They ran one of those things on the news, like a memorial, because she'd been this beautiful, like, you know, cheerleader, homecoming queen, beautiful little nice girl. And so they ran this memorial about her and on the year of her anniversary, and the guy's name is Jeremy Sheets. And by the way, I Google him every once in a while. He lives in Michigan right now. He was accused of her murder, and they ran it, and he goes, I know something about that. So he and his buddy decided they were gonna rape her and kill her. And then they got caught because they burned their clothes, but Jeremy told someone at this party who knew something about it. She went and reported to the police. She ended up wearing a wire, and he confessed. He confessed under on the wire, and then they charged him. The problem was by the time they got to trial, and when I had the case, it was on appeal, he had committed suicide in prison. So the one witness who admitted that he had murdered her with his friend had committed suicide. And so that violates the Confrontation Clause in the United States Constitution, which says you have a constitutional right to confront your accuser. You have a right to cross-examine the person who's challenging you and saying that you committed a crime. So this was one of those cases where I know he did it, guys. I know he did it because there were details that they knew about the location of the body and how she was, and there's no way they didn't do it. But the Confrontation Clause is the Confrontation Clause. And so, you know, I helped write the opinion that set that man free. Even though I know he's guilty. I mean, literally, it tore me up. Like, because inside of me, I was like, he deserves to die. I mean, and death penalty is available in Nebraska, okay? So he was on death row. And so he went from being up for death row, possibly gonna be killed, to walking out the door free because of the constitutional protections afforded him under the Confrontation Clause. Do I think that's right? I do not. It kills me to this day. Do I still think the decision is right? I do, because we have to protect everyone, not just Jeremy Sheets, right? And if we allow the rules to bend in one case, then when you and I get to go to jail or get accused of a crime, the Constitution is not there to protect us. But like I said, because I'm so angry about that man who I know murdered that young lady, I check up on him. I mean, I did. I just know where he is. I mean, and he's a loser too, by the way, guys. Like drug addict, barely makes it, but he does live in Michigan. He's saying he's Jeremy Sheets. So, but why? And the first time when that case tore me, and then there's cases where I like the first time I ever saw a dead person.
Mhm.
Like, you know, the picture of the person smiling and laughing in one picture, the next picture is their corpse after they were murdered. It will literally haunt you forever. You know that movie, Girls Don't Cry with Hilary Swank, about the transgender, we didn't know those words back then, where the word wasn't transgender. She dressed up, she was a girl who identified male, because she pretended she was a boy. And she integrated this group of people in Nebraska, and then when they found out, they got mad and they raped her. Okay, and then they decided that she was gonna turn them in for raping her, so they decided to go and kill her. I worked in that case too. It's a movie, Boys Don't Cry. Or Girls Don't Cry with Hilary Swank. It's just,
Yikes.
no, it's like, to me, criminal law is way too serious. Like, I always joke that all I am is in the reallocation of wealth. I'm taking money from this person and giving it to this person. Like my car accident, sure, I'll give you $100,000. Your contract, you got screwed, yeah, I'll give you some money. To me, I can handle it. People's civil liberties, taking them away, put them in jail forever. That's why I don't do criminal law. I can't handle, emotionally, that's too much for me. But I can handle the reallocation of wealth, right, yeah.
I think it's really interesting that he was released and stuff because he was able to go to a university and talk to students and talk to about his
Oh, you looked him
experience
up?
on them, or- Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that's so shameful. that
It's
he's-
so, and I know he did.
Yeah. But he's like going and talking to students, I'm so innocent,
Mhm.
you know?
He did.
and That sucks.
Yeah, that's like. I mean, but see, but it was just an amazing experience to do a clerkship because you get to deal with the most important cases. Like people's, like this is real life drama. There's a reason why there's more doctor and lawyer TV shows and cops, right? Because those are the people that deal with real life drama. We deal with real life drama, but everyone is always in crisis when they talk to me. Like, and so my husband sometimes was like, we're at dinner, and I'm like, I know, but, yeah, there's always a but. So you have to be willing to give of yourself in that regard if you wanna do this job, because it's a job that demands a lot of your emotions and of your love and time. Okay, all right, so there's also, you can either be a private, you can be a private sector, which is what I do, which I work for law firms, or you can be a government lawyer. Okay, so every DA, you've heard the word DA, but that's the same thing as a prosecutor, guys. A district attorney or a prosecutor, they're the people that represent the people of the United States or the people of Utah, and they prosecute crimes. That's a cool job too. I mean, like, I remember the first time I was in federal court and I stood up and I heard somebody say, Trujilo-Acosta for the United States of America. I was like, that's a big deal. Like, to me, it's that standing up for the country, that's pretty cool. And you can be on both sides, either the government or you can be a defender. And lots of times people like dog defenders and say, who wants to represent criminals? You want them to represent criminals. Because we hold the man accountable for their power. It's important. It really is important. So every time I see a defense attorney, they get put down a lot because people in society, we don't seem to value them, but we should thank them every day. Because they're the ones that keep oppression from happening. I mean, it's really true. So the scales of justice exist for a reason, because they're supposed to be balanced, right? And if you allow the balance to go one way or the other, people get abused and someone's gonna get crushed. So the balancing power is an awesome job, if you ask me, to be able to balance out the power of the government. And the government has unlimited resources. Like, they can run every toxicology report they want. They can hire every expert they want. For the defenders, they have to pay for it themselves. If you go to the PD, they have to apply for grants and stuff. Utah has one of the best defenders in this nation. Like, our system here, they call LDA, Legal Defenders Association. They have some of the best lawyers in the state are at LDA. And all those LDA people end up going off and being great criminal defense attorneys. So anyway, but you can work for the government or you can work for, the private pick section. Oh, a guardian ad litem. Anybody know what a guardian ad litem is? Yeah, that's right. Guardian ad litem are lawyers that represent children. So sometimes in situations when a child needs an advocate for their own position, like sometimes in divorces or in protective order hearings, sometimes the child needs someone to stand up for them. There's an attorney that can be appointed to represent the child. And so their job is just to advocate for their client's position. So maybe mom and dad are fighting about who gets custody, but the child needs someone to stand up and say, well, I want to live with grandma. Or maybe I want to live with mom, whatever the decision is. But guardian ad litem is a very cool job too, because you're helping with kids. And there's opportunities there for you guys to be volunteers too. Like, for example, in addition to the guardian ad litem, if you like kids, there's CASA volunteers. You don't have to be a lawyer to do that. You just help work with children. You're like a caseworker for a child that's going through a legal proceeding. It can be either in juvenile court or it can be in adult court, and you help them. It's a wonderful opportunity. Plus, you learn a lot about the legal system. Which means think about all these other jobs that are out there besides just being a lawyer. And I haven't even talked to you about the support for lawyers there are, like paralegals and investigators. I hire investigators. I hire nurses to do transcriptions of medical records for me in personal injury cases. I have paralegals who do a lot of the back work. All those jobs are amazing. Then everyone that works in the administration of the courts too, those are all people that didn't go to law school, and they have great careers that are law related. They're either clerks of the court, they work in, data processing and file management. Every judge has a bailiff, which is a police officer that works in their courtroom. They have a clerk that works for them as well. There's tons of law related jobs that are pretty neat. And then for me, like I worked clerk for 2 courts, and then I went and got jobs in the private sector. And I've worked at huge law firms with like 1,000 attorneys, which I hated, by the way. And I worked at law firms that have 2 attorneys, and I like being in charge of everything. I don't want to just do one piece of something. But it depends on your personality. Okay, so like some people really love big transactions with like tons of zeros. And if you go and work at a big law firm in New York City, let's say, and you're gonna be working on a $1 billion bond deal, they're gonna give you one task. And you're gonna do that one task until you are dang good at it. Does that make sense? So maybe I'm gonna read this one provision, this provision on private placements, let's say, on securities, on the selling of bonds and securities, on my transaction. I will learn, every transaction that I do, I will learn that one clause, and I will make sure every one of my contracts make that clause amazing. So some people love that level of specificity because they become excellent at that task, and they become an expert in this transaction. That's not me. I like to be a jack of all trades. So that's why I like smaller law firms, but it totally depends on your personality. But there's room for you in the law. Does that make sense? If you're one of those folks that wants to be an expert at something, or if you're somebody that just likes to be learning every day, which is like, I fall in the learning every day kind of category. All right, let's see. Tips I wish someone had told me from the beginning: you can't be a jerk because your classmates end up being your future colleagues. Right? So, I mean, like the most business I get from my friends is from my friends and family, and most of my friends are my lawyer friends. So remember, your colleagues are your future colleagues. So who do I call up when I need to refer a case or I don't understand something? I call my classmates. All right. Professors and law staff at the law school, they're your colleagues too. And you need to think about your judges as a colleague as well. They're like the ref in a game, but you have a deep relationship with them and you see them over and over again in your lifetime. So be kind, be honest, be trustworthy, be nice, and establish yourself as a good person. That sounds so basic, guys, but it is really important, especially in a community that you want to practice in forever. So I practice law in LA. LA is a monster of a place to practice law. I think Utah has about 9,000 active lawyers. 9,000, that's not very many. There's over 600,000 active lawyers in California, which means I may never see someone again. So that gives you a lot of freedom to be a jerk because I don't have to play in the sandbox with you very often, right? It's not a healthy way to practice law because law is already so stressful. In Utah, I must be nice and kind because I will probably see you 1,000 times in my career. So it's a nicer place to practice. I actually had a opposing counsel one time and he was getting really mad at me. And he said to me, I hate you both professionally and personally. And I was like, wow, I don't even have any opinion of you at all until just now. So people, just be nice. It really does matter. And your clients sometimes don't realize that it matters because they want you to be a bulldog, right? I could be a bulldog and still be very nice, right? There's no reason for me to burn a bridge with my colleagues in order to get something that I want in one case because I have to deal with that colleague in 1,000 cases, right? So I'm not going to do something that I think is wrong or unethical or unkind just to get an advantage to one client because I have to practice for 25 more years, okay? So choosing a path. You should take courses and things that you like because the outcome is always going to be better. Like I would never be a dentist. I don't like people's mouths. Like the thought of having my hands in your mouth, that sounds really horrible. And like people's teeth are gross to me and bad breath. No, thank you. I just have, and I don't like body fluids, so I would never be a doctor. Okay. So I never took any biology courses because I don't care. But you ask me to read a book and tell you about it. Absolutely. You ask me to analyze something, I will analyze it because that's what I love. So if you do what you love, the results will be better. Okay, so figure out what that is and go with it, is what I would say. graduation is really the key. The worst thing you can do is not finish school. Because then you're left with all the student loan debt and you don't have a degree. So even if you hate it and hold your nose to do it, you need to finish. Okay, because that degree is what really matters, okay? And it's not so much your class rank, because I was blessed in the sense that I'm a nerd and a half, and I love law, and I was really good at it. And it's like I was top of my class because I really that's who I am. But the guy who graduated last in my class, he's still happy and a lawyer doing really well. I check up on him sometimes too, right? I mean, he's making tons of money and doing a good job as being a lawyer. So it doesn't really matter, you're right, just make sure you get done. But I would get the best grade you can get. Doesn't hurt. Of course, it feels good to make an A, right? So do the best you can. And then, if you find a job doing what you love, you will never work a day in your life. I don't work. My husband is mad at me because he's like, where are you? Oh, I'm at the office, but you just said you were gonna stop by for 5 minutes. 3 hours later, I have gone down a rabbit hole in an investigation or something, and I am fascinated by it. And I don't know the answer yet, and I'm not ready to quit. I have to tell myself not to work. Not because I'm making money, because I love it. I love it, like it's fun. Okay, and I can't tell you how frustrating it is for people who, I can't imagine doing a job I didn't love. Okay, but if you find a job you love, it's so much more fun. So, so to me, I'll spend a Friday night researching a topic that I don't know the answer to. That's so lame, isn't it? But it's fun to me, okay? And that's why I'm really good at what I do. All right, so my career's been really varied. I lived in Nebraska, I lived in California, in Utah, I'm licensed there. I've clerked 2 times. I've been a partner, not in 34 firms, it was supposed to be 3 or 4 firms. And then I've had lots of different jobs. You know how I would find my first husband was a professor, he was a professor at the U, that's how I came here. He's a professor at Cal State Fresno, he was a professor at University of Nebraska. So every time I would go to a new state, I wasn't licensed, but I would go and walk up and down the hallways of the philosophy department, he's a philosophy professor. And I would be like, do you know any lawyers? Can I use your name? And I would call up and go, hi, I'm Grace, I'm new in town, about to sit for the bar. Do you need any clerkship? Can I do some contract work for you? And as a consequence, I got a job at the best places everywhere I went. And he would laugh, my ex-husband would laugh and say, there's like one philosophy job in the whole nation for that year, and you can get a job in 3 weeks. That is the power of a law degree. Seriously, you can go get a job anywhere. They will hire you. If you're smart, you can get a job. Okay, so just so you know, that's one of the things I really like about it. All right. All right, money, people always hear about money. You can make money as a lawyer, that is not why you should be a lawyer. You wanna be a lawyer just to make money, you will end up being sad, and you'll probably have drug problems and alcohol problems and get divorced, that's what happens. Because if you chase the money, it's gonna cause problems, but if you do what you love, the money will follow. Okay, and I teach in the law school too, and I always say to them, that first job, you're not gonna come out making $1 million a year, good lord, can you imagine? But you will make a good, solid living for 25 years. Okay, and I'm sorry, if you're making consistently a good, solid living, you will buy a car and a house and a retirement. And over the course of your lifetime, you will have a very stable career. But people who try to get it all in the first 5 years, they crash and burn. Okay, but this is a job that you can make money, but you must do what you love. So do what you love, the money will come. Focus on your clients and customers, and the money will come. Focus on excellence, and the money will come. Focus on being the best you can be, and the money will come. Find a job that makes you proud of what you do, and the money will come. Find a job that feeds your moral compass, and the money will come. Okay, so I'm telling you, you can be very successful as an attorney, but don't let that be the only reason why you are an attorney. You'll be very sad, because it's an emotionally draining job.